This is American Psycho.
It's hip to be square. It's hip to be square.
And this is Fight Club. They were both released around the same time, but Fight Club looks like it could have been filmed in the late 2000s, while American Psycho looks like it was filmed in the 80s. Why? Because American Psycho was designed to look older. The horrible clothes, the cheesy nightclubs, even the fact that Bateman was obsessed with Huey Lewis in the news.
In '87, Huey released this, 4, their most accomplished album.
It intentionally looks and feels like an 80s movie. This look is achieved in 3 steps, starting with years on from the movie's explosive first appearance. It's interesting to question how far the world has shifted from Bateman's 1980s cultural landscape. Greed is still good, it's just maybe a little better hidden. Bateman's apartment, a soulless, expensive box hung with questionable art and filled with nonsensical and overcomplicated gadgetry, is still common today. What has changed, fundamentally, are the clothes. American Psycho is a snapshot of its time, of power ties and spread collar shirts, extended shoulders and wash wool trousers with a quadruple pleated front.
Yeah. You're dressed okay?
Costume design was so important to this movie, and they had to face various challenges in order to get the clothes they wanted. Cerruti agreed to allow Christian Bale to wear their clothes, but not when the character was killing anyone. Rolex agreed that anyone in the film could wear their watches except Bateman.
Don't touch the watch.
Perry Ellis provided underwear at the last minute after Calvin Klein pulled out of the project. Comme des Garçons refused to allow one of their overnight bags to be used to carry a corpse, so Jean-Paul Gaultier was used instead.
Where did you get that overnight bag?
Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Fashion is central to the action in the movie, and while suits are theoretically timeless, their cut isn't. And American Psycho has a lot of suit-wearing people. So it's not a surprise that while watching the characters wearing those suits now, you feel like you're watching an older movie. Fight Club has suit-wearing people too, but to a lesser extent. And Edward Norton is primary wearing a shirt and sloppy tie. Not too much clothing evolution there. Let's take a screenshot from this scene, and instead of whatever Patrick Bateman is currently wearing, make him wear something more modern. You wouldn't usually come to your office at Piers & Piers wearing a tracksuit like this, but bear with me for this example. Now that we got rid of the old clothes, there's still something giving this shot an old vibe, something behind and around him called set design. American Psycho features a lot of old technology, or a lack of new one. Headphones, hi-fi system, and so on. This all beats you over the head when the movie plays. Fight Club also features technology, but it's never really centered to the story. And standing at the printer while drinking coffee is still a very real thing, and feels just like it did a couple of years ago. This old technology combined with that old dark brown furniture really helps to sell the effect the movie is taking place in the 80s. Let's go back to our screenshot and make the set design also a bit more modern. This helps it look newer, but there's still this 80s music in the background. The 80s were the decade of synthesizer. At the time, the synth was still in its infancy, used in a ton of different movies from that time. From Blade Runner to Scarface. The synth was everywhere during the 80s, and in fact, the first song that opens American Psycho's soundtrack is a synth pop classic, True Faith by New Order. The single biggest cost on the film was purchasing the rights to the various songs used throughout, which took out a majority of the $7 million budget. So, music played a big role in creating the 80s feel, but it's not just the music that gives it that vibe. It's the sound as well. Sound has lots of reverb and not a lot of low end. And when you think about it, the aesthetic kind of matches the reverb. There seems to be this fogginess to the sets on the screen with 80s movies, which visually feels similar to the way reverb sounds. Now that we got that covered, let's go back to this and change the music.
How can I be homophobic? My bitch is gay.
Okay, this is starting to look and sound like we're escaping the 80s, but there's still one last step to make it even more modern. Final reason why American Psycho feels like an old movie is because of its grainy, bland visuals, or shortly, because of its color. American Psycho was shot on film, and the color grading was done in camera. That's why it has a more realistic color palette than the films we see today. Movies after the 2000s started making extensive uses of color grading, and they often have some sort of color grading applied to them. American Psycho was released in 2000, the same year as Oh Brother Where Art Thou?, the first movie to use a digital color grading process. Which means American Psycho was not digitally color graded, hence the reason it has a more natural look. And this is automatically connected to older movies like those from the 80s. Let's compare American Psycho to The Wolf of Wall Street. Movies covering same themes, both set in the 80s. However, one was released 13 years after the other, and you can see the difference in lighting and color grading. If we take a look at these two scenes, the set design and characters are very similar, but The Wolf of Wall Street shot is brighter and has a stylistic warm color grade applied to it, giving him an aesthetic which we connect to newer movies, while American Psycho looks like it lacks that aesthetic. An even better example would be the Vogue commercial starring Margot Robbie, where they recreated the exact same scene from Bateman's apartment. If we compare the face mask shots, we can see a big difference in lighting and color grading. Vogue's commercial uses soft high-key lighting, which is associated with professionalism and clarity, creating a modern remake of the scene which fits the commercial's aesthetic. While American Psycho's lighting isn't high-key, it's also not low-key. If it was, it would look like this, creating a scary atmosphere. Instead, they opted for softer lighting, which was commonly used in movies from that time. Which brings us back to the American Psycho and Fight Club comparison. At a time when soft lighting was the in-style look, Fight Club's creative team instead chose to use hard direct lighting, which creates an aesthetic that is harder to connect to a certain time period. While American Psycho has an aesthetic, it's far more prominent in Fight Club. Everything is either dirty, greasy and gritty in some way, or it's artificial, cold and sterile. Fight Club's director David Fincher is a visual stylist ahead of his time, and at the time of making Fight Club, he had an intimate familiarity with the latest and greatest techniques. Even though digital color grading wasn't available when the movie was made, they used highly graded ASA film stock, which allowed them to crush blacks and still keep highlights intact, giving the film a very contrasty look. In post-production, they used bleach bypass and other chemical techniques to manipulate the look of the footage even further. Let's get back to that screenshot for one last time and apply our Fight Club look to it. This will add more contrast and change the colors, so it looks more like Fight Club.
How can I be homophobic? My bitch is gay.
In the end, it all comes down to a simple question. Does it benefit the story? Would a stylistic color grade do that for American Psycho? Probably. Is American Psycho's cinematography good as it is? Yes.
No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
If you want to use colors to create a unique aesthetic in your videos and photos, check out our Movie LUTs and Lightroom profiles. And if you want to learn more about color grading, check out our color grading course. Links for that are in the description. If you like this video, you might want to check this one, where we explained why short films look the way they do.